Connecting Horizons. It is good to be with you today. My name is Maddie Bogus, and I am the university minister at Nebraska Wesleyan University here in Lincoln, Nebraska. So I am glad for this invitation that Mandy extended to me to preach and sort of set the stage for this sermon series that's going to be taking place over the month of August. And now I know too, August for me means I'm counting down the days for when school starts. We start in 22 days. I'm a little bit worried about it, but we got it. But we're going to be talking today about what it looks like to gather as God's peoples. So before I begin, will you just join me in a moment of prayer and centering? Gracious and loving God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts reveal your love and your transformational power. Together we pray. Amen. When thinking about gathering, I think about the gatherings that I had throughout my life, the things that were really impactful. And you may be thinking, oh, maybe it was a worship service, something like that. But no, where I go is to kids' birthday parties, specifically the ones that I had as a kid. Because these were my favorite experiences. They were the best gatherings. I loved it because my mom and my dad I think helped a little bit. But my mom would always let myself or my brother, when it was our birthday, go and pick out whatever theme we wanted. Did anyone else sort of do this? Where you would go and you'd stroll through the aisle and you'd look at the different options for the plates and the party hats. You always had to have the party hats that would match. And we'd always find then the matching piñata that would go along with it. And my parents, too, would always allow for us to pick whatever theme we wanted. For myself, I remember one year I wanted a duck-themed birthday party. Well, they didn't make many duck piñatas, so we made out of paper mache a duck piñata that we then had, and the cake had a duck on it. My mom always made sure that every cake matched with whatever theme it was. It was always the special gathering, the special celebration that, yes, there was the fun cake and the party supplies, but there was also this gathering of friends, of family members. There was time for us to just feel like, wow, this is really special. As a young kid, I'm grateful that there was such intentionality, there was purpose in that time, that it made me feel loved. And maybe you're thinking in your own life, those gatherings that you've had where you've just left feeling like, wow, this is exactly what it's supposed to feel like. Maybe it's a wedding or an anniversary. Maybe it's those birthday parties. Maybe it's a worship service. But gathering together with others is central to what we are called to do as humans. It is central to how we are to interact with others. We have to be with other people. And I see that because I think God truly is relational. At the center of who God is, even as people of faith, every week we gather in a space to be with each other because we know that this is what we are meant to be. And I think that that is important as well for how God calls us to be in relationship with one another, but also to be in relationship with us. From the beginning of time, God has established this. God created Adam and knew that it was not good for him to be alone, so he gave him a partner, someone that he could be in relationship with. And then God calls out to Abraham and he tells him, I want to be in relationship with you. Hear these words from Genesis 12. The Lord said to Abram, leave your land, your family, and your father's household For the land that I will show you, I will make you a great nation and will bless you. I will make your name respected, and you will be a blessing. All the families of the earth will be blessed because of you. God enters into the world where Abram is. God goes to Abram and meets him exactly where he is in that moment. And God continues to do this because Abram became the starting point. Abraham would lead the people, would start this story that we as Christians follow today. Because God continues to enter into our own lives. As God would then also go and see Hagar in the desert and meet her. God would go to Moses in the burning bush and give commandments that would change and shape the people. God would go to the leaders. He would call out to Samuel and David to be people who would be strong and faithful. God would use the voice of prophets to show what it is to stand up for justice. God has always been speaking through us. God has always been meeting us where we are because God wants to gather with us. And if there is no clearer example, it is through Jesus Christ. When we celebrate Christmas, we may hear those songs of Emmanuel, which is God with us. Jesus is entering into our world, our messy, broken world, and is willing to be a part of it. And God didn't decide to send Jesus alone. No, he called out to Joseph and Mary and said, care for Jesus, care for him. And then as Jesus grew, Jesus invited others along in the ministry. Jesus continued to be in relationship with people. Because just as God had called out to Abram to lead the people, Jesus does the same through the disciples. In Matthew 4, he says, as Jesus walked along the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, throwing nets into the sea because they were fishermen. Come, follow me, he said, and I'll show you how to fish for people. Right away, they left their nets and followed him. Jesus goes out to where they had been fishing. He goes out and meets them to form that relationship. And two, Jesus reminds his people how they can gather. For he says, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'm there with them. See, God, through Jesus and through us, is all about gathering. Just as Jesus would feed the hungry, would heal those even when it wasn't what he was supposed to be doing. He would cast out evil spirits. He would continue to call people to be in relationship with him, to call Peter to be the foundation of the church, to call people like Mary Magdalene to be the first one to proclaim the good news of resurrection. God would call out to Paul to write and encourage the early church. Jesus continued this ministry to become part of the community. And so it's clear that as followers of God, we have to gather. We have to be in community. We have to create that sense. We have to be willing to go to the places and meet the people. Well, I think that God has created this design for us to be in relationship with others, to gather together. Let's be honest. People are messy. Community is complicated. It is not always easy to gather. Sometimes there are times where we're with people where we really wish we were not gathered together because they're saying certain things that we just don't agree with. Or there are even those moments of maybe the dreaded staff meeting that you have where you're going, what are we doing here? Or maybe you're asking the question, do we really have to have this meeting? Could you have just sent me an email? Anyone ever had that? Had my fair share of those. But those times where we start to think maybe this gathering is not exactly what we need. Or maybe too, we've experienced it as well, those times where we are trying to be in relationship with other people. We are gathering together, but we feel so disconnected still. We're sitting there. Maybe you're sitting now in your chair and you're saying, I don't feel connected. I don't know if I belong in this space. I don't know if this is where I'm supposed to be. Even when we are gathering with others, we can feel lonely and isolated. We can feel like we are unsure. Gathering together doesn't always feel like it has any direction or purpose. A few years ago, I read Priya Parker's book, The Art of Gathering. Has anyone read this book before? I know it's hard to see, but if you have, I know for myself, it was a very impactful book. I read it before COVID, but The Art of Gathering, Parker talks a lot about how we can gather better. And so Priya Parker, some of her background is that she was a conflict resolution facilitator. So she would be someone that if there was a conflict happening in a company, she would come in to help facilitate some of these dialogues. And from her work, she was finding that she was really trying to create spaces where people could be honest and vulnerable, where they needed to have those hard conversations. And she found that sometimes people did not know how to gather together. They didn't know how to actually be with one another. And in this book, she talks about how for her, a gathering is anytime you have three or more people together, you have a beginning, middle, and end point of a gathering. But the most important thing that she points out that every gathering needs, no matter what, is that they have to have purpose. This is the why you're gathering. This is the question of what is happening in this community, what is happening in this world, what is going on that we need. For her work, when she was a conflict resolution facilitator, she was finding that the purpose was to make sure that people could communicate with each other. It was to open up dialogue. But for others, our gatherings may have a different purpose. And I think that that's the thing too, that so often the spaces that we go into, we don't know what we're doing. We have forgotten what is the purpose of this. Sometimes it can be so easy that we just always have this meeting. It's always scheduled, but we never discuss why. What is it that we need to discuss during it? Why are we gathering to worship? What is it? And I think that that is where God's desire for us to be in relationship, to gather us together, provides us with that purpose. Because even in the church, we can fall trap into losing the sense of what our purpose is. We can start to believe that our purpose is just to get as many people as we can into our church, and that's it. We can start to believe that it is about relating the most to young people. As a campus minister, I think I relate to this pretty often, where sometimes I think that it is just about how many people can I count and then report back that I impacted in ministry. How many people did I talk to? Or I might start to think, how much Gen Z slang can I throw in to my message to try and relate and bring in the young people? But then when I start to be seeing this, my purpose becomes transactional. It becomes about, what can this other person give to me? And all I care about is seeing them as a number. But that is not what God's purpose is for us. That is not what God's design for each of us is. Because God's purpose is not one of transactional relationships. God's purpose is one of transformational relationships. It is transformational gatherings. I want to read again from Genesis 12. I want you to hear this again to understand what God is saying to Abram. The Lord said to Abram, "Leave your land, your family, and your father's household for the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation and will bless you. I will make your name respected, and you will be a blessing. All the families of the earth will be blessed because of you." God is transforming Abram's life. God even gives Abram a new name of Abraham. God is saying to him in this moment, leave behind your family. Leave behind the land that you're on. Leave behind everything that you know and transform your life. Come and follow and see what I will provide. Because of this, because of Abraham and Sarah's faithfulness, their life is transformed in ways they can't even imagine. They would go on to have a child when they thought that that was not going to be part of their plan. They would go on to further this nation, to build up people who believed in the ways of Yahweh. And they are led to a greater purpose that is not just to stay in the same place that they are, but to go and to be transformed. And again, let's read what Jesus says to the disciples. As Jesus walked alongside the Galilee Sea, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, throwing fishing nets into the sea because they were fishermen. "Come, follow me," he said, "and I'll show you how to fish for people." Right away, they left their nets and followed him. Their lives are transformed. Immediately, Simon, Peter, and Andrew's lives are not going to be the same. Yes, they may continue to fish, but now there's a different purpose that they have. There's a different vision that they have for their own lives. And even too, Jesus continues to show us what that means, what it is for us to have lives that are transformed. As Jesus clarifies this purpose, he answers questions about what is the greatest commandment. "Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your mind." The first and greatest commandment. And the second is like this: you must love your neighbor as yourself. This is an invitation to transformational love, to being able to find that purpose that each of us are called to. That when we gather, that is why we gather. It is not just to get a few more people in the pews or in the seats. No, but it is to be transformed. The purpose may be the same, to show that love, but how we live that out, how we do that will vary by each of us. I know for myself, when I was discerning my own call to ministry, I began to look at other pastors, and I started to see them and how they would preach or how they would interact with people. I knew many pastors who were so good about just going up and being like, "Hello, welcome," just so extroverted. And I was like, that is not me. And I would start to think, do I need to be doing that if I want to be a pastor? Is that the gifts that I have to have? And then what I found is that what it was about was not me having to be what I envisioned every other pastor to look like, but it was me finding what those gifts are that God was already pouring into me, that the ways in which God had created me to be unique, to fit in this time. I know I found that for myself, That was through justice. It was working for how can we talk about faith and the impact we can make in the community. That was important to me. That was part of what it is. Another thing that I found was that I really care about discipleship, about making sure young people discover their own call to ministry, that they have a foundation of their faith. That was what I was finding my own purpose could be. When I started to shift and realize that it wasn't about the specific role that I had to fit, but when it was about using my own unique gifts or what I had as God's beloved, I became a different person where I could more easily just say, yes, this is my mission. This is my purpose for how I show that transformational love of God. Each of us have those in us. You may not be a pastor, but you may have gifts that allow for you to show the transformational love of God. Maybe it is through your understanding of science to help people who are in need of healing. Maybe you're able to talk to children and to be able to teach them and guide them, to help them understand topics better. Your gifts can be used in artwork and writing and speaking and just having a good sense of humor and your strong conviction to your morals to stand up for what you believe is right. Each is needed. Each of these is part of what we need to bring when we gather to be a part of that. Because God didn't just call people who are all the same. Jesus didn't create disciples who all had the same gifts. No, he called out to those who had different things, and he gathered them together because he knew that that diversity, that all of them together could create something more beautiful, that they could work for God's kingdom, that when they gather, there was a purpose behind it, and they needed each of them in it. So I want to invite you to pause for a moment and to consider these two questions. What is your purpose? And who are you in God's story? What is your purpose? And who are you in God's story? I'm sure you may not have an answer right now, but I want to invite you during this week and across this next month as well to think about the ways that God is calling you to be a part of that transformational story, to be thinking about how you gather with other people, how your interactions, how you can be a part of something that has meaning, that you can remember that wherever 2 or 3 or more are gathered, that God is present in those moments, and that you have gifts to transform, to continue on the mission of God. So as you discern how you may continue to join a group or to get involved in different ways, may you continue to foster that transformational love in every place, in every meeting, with every person, to gather in the unexpected places, to be willing to go where others are. For myself, there's only one way that I think that there's one way that we can really experience this, and that is through gathering at the communion table. When we gather at this table, it is a reminder of God's grace and